Excuse the mustache. Pretty girl said it looked good on me, so I'm rocking it for now. Joker is not a terrible film by any means, but it's not a film that I personally fell in love with when it first came out. I understand why people like Joker, I understand what people get from it, but it's just never been a film that personally connected with me. I don't think I was the only one who wasn't too fussed about Joker, and I think there's a valid justification for this. There are certain objective qualities that cause this film to not quite sit right with certain people, and these are the qualities that we'll be discussing in this retrospective. I'm not making this video just to trash on this film, I mean I kind of am, but I'm also making it to dissect why myself and various others were unable to connect with this film, and hopefully give people who love this film a better understanding of why others didn't. I remember when this film first came out, it was quite controversial to not like it or criticise it, and if you even dared to compare it to Taxi Driver, then you were labelled as a film snob. And it was annoying because I always thought that the issues with this film ran so much deeper than all of that. People weren't just dunking on it because it was cool to hate, because it had a strange mixed bag of good and bad qualities. It had various flaws that were maybe not a big deal to some, but were quite rightly a big deal to others, and I'm going to be breaking down what those flaws were. I have to say though, I do remember people getting really rowdy at the people who reviewed this film negatively, like Ralph the Movie Maker, I remember, got a lot of for his review. I get why, because it wasn't a very well laid out review, even though the points I agreed with 100%, all of them. The structuring was off in that video, but I always thought it was wrong how he was bullied into taking it down. It was a bit of a sucky time. For transparency's sake, you have to remember that I am one of the people who this film didn't really resonate with, so this video is all about hearing from the alternative perspective. The perspective of someone who the film just didn't vibe with, and I think that kind of represents a lot of people. Long story short, yeah, this video is for the film snobs. And another disclaimer before we start this video, I have a very monotone voice, but I'm not a miserable person, so throughout this video you're going to be hearing my silly old voice, and you're going to be thinking, oh, this guy's so miserable and just depressed, clinically depressed. He's really bummed out at how bad this movie is, and really I don't care. I'm actually enjoying doing this. I'm enjoying writing it all out and describing my feelings, but just because I have such a horribly monotonous voice, it'll seem like I'm just being a miserable bastard and being like, oh, I hope no one enjoys this film, I hope everyone hates it as much as I do. That's not the vibe I'm going for, but I can't help it because my voice is just the way it is. You might see a video of mine and think, oh, this guy's probably miserable, he's probably awful at parties, I'm never going to speak to him in real life, and honestly that's not the case, because in real life I don't give a fuck what your favourite film is. I don't care if you like fucking Couples Retreat, honestly. I'll take anyone, please talk to me. This is my first time revisiting the film since first seeing it in cinemas in 2019. I never felt the urge to rewatch it. In fact, the only reason I would revisit it is if I was doing a big fat review of it, and would you look at that, here we are.
And remember to fucking subscribe. We'll start things on the positive side of the spectrum by going over the elements of this film that I liked, well not only liked, but thought were well done. These elements will range between anything from tiny individual details to full-on reoccurring narrative themes. At the start of the film, where Arthur gets his first ass whooping, which is the first of many, as he lies on the floor, bruised and beaten, you can see his fake flower leaking its water, trickling down in a tear-like fashion. It's a small feature, but I had fun noticing it this time round. It's a more tasteful and original version of pathetic fallacy, should we say. And we're done with the things I liked segment. No, I'm just joshing you, there's more than that. Joaquin Phoenix's performance is obviously quite remarkable. He carries the whole film in my opinion. It's a performance that is expressive, pronounced and memorable. The way I see it, the people who were emotionally moved by this film only have Phoenix to thank for that. The way the movie incorporates Joker's iconic laugh as an actual disorder was an extremely clever take. It's taking a sound that always evoked this character's malevolence and recontextualizing it so it now instead casts a sympathetic and sorrowful light on this man. The film has really good cinematography that is intentionally ugly and filthy, yet it still manages to be pleasing to the eye, which is a hard balancing act to pull off. The colour palette is fairly unique despite perhaps leaning a little too heavily on the blues and oranges, but regardless there are quite a few shots in this movie that are genuinely really well composed. I will be criticising this film's lack of originality throughout the course of this video, but to give it credit, one scene that felt unique to this film was the macabrely funny scissor murder scene where the dwarf couldn't reach the latch and had to request the help of the murderous psychopath he was trying to flee from. For whatever reason, I saw that and thought, yeah, that's got some personality to it. When it comes to the themes of this film, there were a few sentiments that I partially resonated with because I felt they were well communicated. Lines of dialogue from Arthur such as "all I have are negative thoughts" cut right to the heart of the issue of mental illness for me. It's a line that millions of people can relate to, yet it feels tender and personal. It's universal without it feeling pandering. Phoenix's delivery infuses the line with the authenticity that it needed. If this was a quote that particularly connected with you, then I understand that. Secondly, the sentence he writes in his journal, "The worst part about having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't," is one of the few statements made by this movie that doesn't feel like it's aping the thematic identity of various other films that tackle similar issues. There's a lot of ideas expressed in Joker that have already been expressed better by other stories, but this here is one example of the film having its own voice. It's a poignant message that makes you think, and it's fairly unique to this movie. This one's a bit more personal, but there was something to the therapy scenes that I related to, namely the futility of it. The feeling like you're sharing your darkest demons and all the person opposite you can say is, "Oh well, tell me more," or "How did that make you feel?" Finally, there is an odd catharsis in watching a tormented soul just let go of everything. Let go of this endless perseverance to keep happy and sane. Let go of this arduous wrestling match with the adversity that life throws at you. To just say, fuck it, I'm not trying anymore, and I'm going to just tranquilly revel in the chaos. There's a glee to be felt in just accepting the pointlessness of everything and tuning out of society. I think this story truly puts us in the headspace of a troubled individual who would eventually succumb to his own insanity and become a murderer. We empathise with a killer who's given up on society and feel retribution when he commits morally reprehensible acts. That is the power of storytelling, to empathise with the disturbed. But it's all pretend, it's a fucking film that's just making you empathise, it's not condoning anything, it's just making you empathise.
Well, let me get this straight. You think that killing those guys is funny?
I do.
That is all of the positives out the way, and now we'll be getting into my critique, but I just want you to appreciate that this film is indeed a mixed bag. That's why I've highlighted all of these pros just now. These things I've just mentioned are quite impressive. Again, things aren't so simple with this film. It isn't just that it's a big piece of shit because you have these factors that make you go, oh, that's not bad. That's some pretty good filmmaking right there. But that being said, I'd still insist that the flaws that I'm about to discuss do substantially taint this film, so much so that it becomes something that is overall mediocre. But that is enough foreplay. Let's get into this bitch.
We fucked up.
To best communicate what my grievances are with this film, I think we should first look at what kind of narrative Joker is. The story of Joker can be defined in many different ways, but I think fundamentally it's a man versus society story. It's a showcase of an individual's disillusionment with the social structures around him as these structures and these institutions mistreat or reject him. For this story to resonate, we both need to find the character, the man, believable, as well as the world around him, the society. It's a good story on paper, but with filmmaking, it's all in the execution. So how does this film execute its themes? Well, on the man side of the man versus society story, we have Joaquin Phoenix giving a solid humanistic performance where the actor is drawing on something very personal. Joaquin Phoenix is an actor whose performance quality is more or less completely independent of the director he's working with. Some actors are more reliant upon great movie directors to come out with fantastic performances, but that's not the case with Phoenix. He is one of those intense performers who is always striving striving for authenticity. If you ask me, Phoenix giving an amazing performance as the Joker was inevitable as soon as he was cast for the role. If you'd seen The Master, if you'd seen Her, you'd know that this is one of the greatest actors working today. That half of the film is carried by Phoenix, and for the most part there are no problems there. It's when we go over to the society half where things start to get clunky.
Don't ignore him. He's being nice to you.
Before I go any further, I'll just come out and say that I typically prefer naturalistic performances over cartoonish, campy ones. I like seeing campy performances in appropriate contexts where it fits the tone, like a Sam Raimi film or an Indiana Jones film, but if I'm watching something like The Joker and it's a piece that I'm supposed to take quite seriously, I don't want goofy performances popping up. Seeing a tropey, melodramatic performance in these kinds of films always takes me right out, and I think justifiably so. Joker is littered with this kind of acting. Not from the lead, of course, but from the majority of the characters he interacts with. You may say, well, they're only side characters with a handful of scenes, but collectively, all of these people make up the society of the movie. The society which acts as the primary antagonist to Arthur. And for the most part, every time he interacts with a character from the society, they come across as insistent straw men / women designed to expediently convey a point about how awful things are in this city. The dialogue isn't made up of natural conversation that subtly tells you about the world. It's more or less all, God, this place sucks ass. They don't give a shit about us.
They don't give a shit about people like you, Arthur.
When characters talk like this, I don't see them as human beings. I just see the insistent inner workings of the script. Some of these people are straight out of the fucking Simpsons, honestly.
If you don't return the sign, I gotta take it out of your paycheck.
I don't find the film's world believable when it has to resort to beating you over the head with blatant messaging.
This building is so awful, isn't it?
You see, do people talk like that? Like, maybe they'd say, this place sucks, but this building is so awful, isn't it? This building is so awful, isn't it? Just think about that for a second.
This building's so awful, right, Mommy?
Yes, we can hear you, Gigi.
Okay, we get it, this building isn't very nice. I mean, we couldn't figure that out with the graffiti already, so you just had to let us know audibly, thank you. It's just the film using the dialogue to rush straight to the point without any tastefulness. And that's the first line said by one of the most important side characters, by the way. Hey, so tell us about this girl you like. Oh, well, don't know where to start. Well, first of all, man, just here's one thing for you. She fucking hates the building we're living in. Like, just to get me started. This vein of overt and insistent storytelling is present for more or less the whole film, and not just in the dialogue. I always found the opening scene where Arthur gets mugged for seemingly no reason quite jarring. Sure, this happens, like random acts of violence from people who just want to cause shit, but the way it's executed here is honestly nearly comically random. It's like an altercation that Theo Von would just describe out of nowhere. Yeah, man, like, I got beat up in an alley with a clown costume on. Forgive my Theo Von impression. There is a lot of unintentionally funny scenes in this film that are supposed to be viewed with the utmost seriousness, but it just doesn't work. The more serious I'm supposed to take it, the funnier it gets. It does not have that much self-awareness, this film.
Buddy, tell us what's so fucking funny.
But now I realize it's a fucking comedy.
I watched Trap the other day, which isn't really a good film, and it's extremely silly, but it at least felt like it knew it was being silly. Joker and Trap use the same kind of clunky cinematic language, but Joker expects us to view this shit like it's the most profound, authentic thing ever created. When the Joker bangs his head on the side of the phone booth, relatively lightly, I should add, and all of a sudden the glass has this massive fracture, the audience is supposed to go, ooh, this is tense, how disturbing, how foreboding, when really this is the most campy, tropey visual you could have included in a film about mental illness. Ooh, the fractured glass motif to indicate his fractured mind, how deviously clever. Honestly, using the fractured glass motif should be fucking outlawed for how trite and unoriginal it is.
Because of my multiple personality theme, I've chosen the motif of broken mirrors to show my protagonist's fragmented self.
The messed up thing is, the fractured glass is clearly a piece of CGI that was added in post to give the scene that extra bit of edge. This moment would have been so much more effective and poignant if the glass didn't fracture, and instead Arthur's head made a pathetic little bumping sound. The glass slightly shakes, and it's this pathetic little whimper of him trying to be noticed in this world but failing. They should have got me to write this fucking movie. If you're one of those people who watches these scenes and takes them seriously, then fair enough, but you should be able to understand why a decent amount of people would find them silly.
Don't ignore him. He's being nice to you.
The scene where Thomas Wayne just punches Arthur is a strange one, because on one hand, yeah, if this creepy guy was behaving like this right in front of you and you were alone with him in the bathroom, and then you find out that this was the same guy that came to your house and harassed your son the other day, sure, a punch might be warranted. On paper, it's not too unreasonable to think that someone may respond like this, but again, it's that damned execution. It's so abrupt and comedic that I can't help but laugh. How he just brusquely walks away and you hear him from off screen go, "Touch my son again and I'll fucking kill you."
Touch my son again, I'll fucking kill you.
Get the fuck away from my son, you fucking piece of shit! Yeah, it's a human response, you know, this is like very territorial, it's what like a man does, you know, when his son's threatened, but this guy's running for fucking mayor at the same time, like, can we have some subtlety? The sound effect too. Why'd he punch him then? Like, if he punched him when the dude was shouting in his face, then I'd believe it more, but just when the guy's laughing.
You think this is funny?
Oh, you think this is funny, you sick fuck? Like, people in this film are so fucking stupid. I get it's one of the points of the movie that members of the public don't know how to respond to mentally ill people, but come on. Anyone with a brain cell would see a guy laughing like this and be like, okay, this guy's clearly unwell, I should call someone, but I should, like, get myself away from this person, but just for safety. Nah, fuck that, I'll just fucking punch him, you know, that'll teach him. Instead of acting feasibly, so many people in this film go, "Ugh, what are you doing?" Or, "You think this is funny, punk?" It's like in that South Park episode where everyone's too dumb to recognise what the deal with Timmy is.
The name of the band is Timmy and the Lords of the Underworld, not just Timmy. Timmy! And the Lords of the Underworld. Timmy! It's always about you, isn't it?
Thomas Wayne is such a one-dimensional douchebag in this. It's just rich celebrity bad, and it's the same with Murray Franklin. No, I don't relate to Arthur's hatred of them because they just aren't feasible people. They are cardboard agents of the heavy-handed script. These guys are really nasty pieces of work. Just hate them, hate them, hate them!
I'll fucking kill you.
It's not just with the characters either, because the overall world building of this film has that same forced sensibility. It's okay in movies where the setting is pretty much its own character to have exposition dished out through news broadcasts that play in the background, but good lord does this film spam that option. And how it just blatantly lays out the themes of the film in the most scrutinisingly crystal clear fashion so the audience knows exactly what to think.
It's almost as if our less fortunate residents are taking the side of the killer.
It's almost as if the underclass are taking the side of the killer.
It's nothing but clowns.
Nothing but clowns? Do you get it?
Someone who hides behind a mask, yet they're too scared to show their own face.
You get it because it's hypocritical, because his son will become Batman. It's just insanely good writing.
All the crazy shit out there, they're animals.
People are upset. They're struggling, looking for work. These are tough times.
There's so much exposition.
They don't give a shit about people like you, Arthur. And they really don't give a shit about people like me either.
Great dialogue. Another way in which this film conveys these themes of society bad is through the visuals. Now here, things are a little more tasteful. Again, good, filthy cinematography. But after a while, it starts to become a little one note. It's the same visual cues for the whole film, just repeated over and over again. Piles of garbage, graffiti everywhere, flickering lights. Oh, but the flickering lights are extra clever because they both demonstrate how run down things are in the city, but they also put the audience on edge because flickering lights are indeed quite scary. I swear to God, if I see another flickering light... No more, please, just stop with the fucking flickering lights! We get it, the city's a shithole.
This building is so awful, isn't it?
I praised the cinematography earlier, but you do get bored of the same mix-up of blue and orange that ends up being ever-present. The colour palette never really evolves from there. Even though this film has a lot of good qualities, because of how blatant and simplistic the themes are, and because the themes don't really get fleshed out in any meaningful ways, your interest starts to wane. No pun intended, you fucking losers. Okay, this guy's life sucks and everyone's mean to him. I guess he's gonna go crazy and kill someone at the end, but what else? You get to that infamous talk show scene and the dialogue is just a basic retelling of what the movie is about.
The system that knows so much, you decide what's right or wrong. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy.
I mean, there's so much self-pity, Arthur. You sound like you're making excuses for killing those young men.
You see, Joker, what you did there was murder people, and that's not good, but you're saying they deserve it because you feel sorry for yourself, and you're full of self-pity, and you're trying to start a movement, and you're laughing. No, I'm not trying to start a movement, I'm just pissed off, baby, and I'm gonna go goblin mode on everyone's ass. Okay, that's not in the script, but you get what I mean. The dialogue in this movie is okay, it's not fantastic. When it comes to Phoenix's lines, it's definitely him elevating the material, because if you actually pay attention to what's being said, it's a little dumb. At the very least, it's basic. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. For the record, it's okay to be preachy sometimes, as long as what you're saying is the least bit original, but I wouldn't say that was the case here.
That we'll just sit there and take it like good little boys. That we won't werewolf and go wild.
That we won't werewolf and go wild. Only Phoenix could have sold that line. That we won't werewolf and go wild. This movie's for 15-year-olds.
Got nothing left to lose. Nothing can hurt me anymore.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
There's this one line which people cite as being quite powerful because Phoenix delivers it with a voice crack.
If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me, but these guys...
I will say it is quite a tragic line and it does make me feel sorry for this dude. It's 100% down to Phoenix though. Anyway, this lady over here starts coming out with Karen phrases.
No, you cannot joke about that.
Yeah, that's not funny.
These people are supposed to be the voice of the popular but unlikable mentality of polite society and almost groupthink. No, you can't joke about that because that's nasty and evil. The point is they're out of touch upper class people who don't like hearing about nasty things even through comedy, almost like a conservative censorship angle it's going for here, pretending society's all sunshine and rainbows. But again, I can't see these people as anything other than straw men and women to convey the point of the scene.
Arthur, that's not the kind of humor we do on this show.
You see, Joker, that's not what's funny. You can't joke about that, it's not funny.
Your son's been hit by a drunk driver. He's dead.
If you think I'm being nitpicking, then just remember that this is an 18+ R-rated film. This is supposedly for adults, yet it feels so petulant and juvenile with what it has to say and how it's saying it. If it wasn't taking itself so seriously, then this childish tone wouldn't be too much of an issue, but the film insists upon its own profundity.
Police, get what you fucking deserve!
The music that starts to ramp up as Joker is about to shoot Murray needs to get gone.
What do you get?
I don't think so.
When you cross...
It's a derivative track of suspense, first of all, but secondly, it makes what happens next so easy to telegraph. This moment would have been endlessly more shocking had there been no music at that point.
Police, get what you fucking deserve!
I will say, whilst we are discussing other areas of world building, that the scene at the beginning on the bus comes over as a lot more grounded. I didn't mind that scene. It communicated the idea of the general public being uncomfortable around mental illness effectively and realistically. It also established the character's laughing condition in a way that fit into the film's world. We see his medical card that he shows to people who get confused in public. It's still technically exposition, just typed up on an in-universe card, but it's exposition that I'll give a pass. Film just can't help but exposit information at you. If only he remembered he had that when he was talking to Thomas Wayne. Another subplot that is intended to act as a sizable chunk of the film's emotional core is the love interest narrative that turns out to be all in his head, which makes me laugh just because oof, gone wrong, gone sexual, all in head, oh bro. Now let's talk about this love interest character. The performance is fine, but she doesn't get nearly enough time to breathe in this film. All we know about her character is that she hates this fucking building and is vaguely disillusioned with the shite state of the city. Now you might say, well, most of these scenes turn out to be imagined anyway, so she's not even a real character, so it doesn't matter if she isn't fleshed out. Well, okay, but since I don't care about this one-dimensional imaginary girlfriend with no personality and minimal screen time, when the big reveal comes and there's supposed to be this big gut punch, I feel nothing, because why should I? There's nothing lost. It's like, oh, that girl we knew 3 things about, like, a part of her isn't real, so that's really sad, isn't it? For most of Kate Winslet's scenes in Eternal Sunshine, she's playing an imagined version of that character, but you still care about her. The big date in Joker that acts as the crux of the relationship is montaged over in this vague way. Who needs characterization, right? The twist is meaningless, also it's derivative as shit. Like, really? You actually did the it's all in the head shtick, and not in any original way either. You can see that shit coming a mile away. The reveal comes in the form of Arthur going inside this woman's apartment and her coming in and being startled by his presence, saying stuff like, "What are you doing?" and "Your name's Arthur, right? Are you okay?" Now, just from those tells, a person with a functioning brain can deduce what's happened here. But no, that's not enough. The movie needs to cut back to the past scenes and show what's actually going on. Fucking hell. Don't say I'm biased. I'll have no one say I'm biased because I critique this sort of shit when it happens in things I like. Mr. Robot Season 1 was almost completely ruined by this same twist. It's only how the show writers built upon it in following seasons that redeemed it for me. Season 1 is such a shameless rip-off of Fight Club that in my headcanon I had to imagine it as an actual reboot of the IP, just with hacking involved. It's still a really good season, but it's also just so derivative in other areas. Anyway, forget that.
We just wanted to make something that felt grounded in a reality.
What's so funny? Freak!
Joker was directed by Todd Phillips, who previous to this project directed the Hangover trilogy, War Dogs, and Due Date. Now, the Hangover trilogy and Due Date are 4 films that I'm fairly familiar with, as I'd rewatched them a lot as a teen because I had them downloaded on my iPod. The hilarious thing is that these films possess similar kinds of flaws to Joker. Even as a young teenager, I'd watch them and think these are a little different to your average whimsical, raunchy comedy movies. They conducted themselves as serious and professional productions with classy cinematography and theatrical extended title sequences. They even had renowned A-list actors work on them like Bradley Cooper or Robert Downey Jr. It all gave the impression as if the director was pretending he was making something more than just a dumb corporate comedy movie. Like he was an artist stuck making these formulaic products who actually wanted to make a real movie. The Hangover 3 advertised itself as an epic conclusion of sorts, despite being a cynical sequel that only existed because its predecessors made a good amount of money. It was all of a sudden pretending to be this grandiose finale as if there'd been some continual narrative transpiring across these 3 films. Even how they're called parts as well, like Hangover Part 2, Hangover Part 3, like no, they're just silly sequels, man. The first Hangover was a pandering dude bro film with no original voice. The second Hangover was an identical copy of the original made to greedily capitalise off of the IP, but Hangover 3 comes out and all of a sudden this has all been building to a profound ending. All of that Zach Galifianakis comedy was actually serving towards a story about him being some autistic guy who needs help and is actually really sad or some bullshit. No, Hangover 3 would have just had the same storyline as 1 and 2 if the producers thought they could get away with it, but even they knew that rehashing twice in a row may have been a bit too on the nose. So instead they went for a thrown together story about Alan's mental deterioration and something about how he has to say goodbye to Chow and grow up. Chow's all of a sudden this scary villain, and it's like a crime drama or some shit with John Goodman. The bottom line being that these films of Todd's go about as though they are these heartfelt artistic works when fundamentally they are just crude comedies.
Not naming my son after for a masturbating dog.
And this is a vein of pretentiousness that's quite rare. In fact, I think it's probably unique to this situation. They aren't even good comedies either. There's no clever writing. It's just Zach Galifianakis with this tired shtick. Honestly, it's like all the jokes were written by the desperately unfunny kid in the classroom.
Who let the dogs out? Who brought this guy along?
Trust me, I've seen these films numerous times, and I never really laughed that much, even when I was 14. Naked Chinese man funny. That is the level we're operating on here, which to be fair is quite funny actually.
Right after you suck on these little Chinese nuts!
A lot of the comedy in these movies is based upon people behaving like arseholes in the direction of our main characters for no reason. Sound familiar?
But you know that's Little Chapel, you know where that is?
I do. It's at the corner of Get a Map and Fuck Off.
Yeah, that's how a doctor talks, people. And even when the characters have an in-universe reason to be an arsehole, it still comes over as contrived because of the acting and dialogue. All the comedy is just these guys getting treated like shit and occasionally beaten up. I know why this is done, it's so it's harder for the main cast to follow the breadcrumbs. If everyone was normal and cool, they'd probably find Doug in no time. However, it's particularly jarring here because these hangover films have no sense of heightened reality. It's not like it's American Pie where the tone is inherently goofy because, again, Todd Phillips shoots these things like serious movies instead of comedies. It's on one half trying to be a comedy and failing at that, and on another half trying to be this artistic serious film and it's failing at that. He's depicting a reality that's quite close to normalcy, so when characters behave in these flamboyant ways, it doesn't fit. Todd Phillips' comedies take themselves too seriously, insist upon their own seriousness, just like the Joker movie. They have cartoonishly assaholic people that don't feel feasible and just seem contrived. This is Todd Phillips' directorial voice, just obnoxious, dude bro, pretentious crap.
Is something funny, asshole?
He's competent enough, he can shoot a film well. There is a technical quality to each of these films, they look well produced and neat. Take War Dogs as another example, a perfect 5 out of 10 average movie. But you need to have more than just that industry competence to make a genuine, heartfelt character study. As pretentious as this may sound, Phillips doesn't really know how to devise an original, artistic voice. Outside of Phoenix, there isn't really anything about the filmmaking that feels like it stems from a personal perspective. Yeah, it's well shot, but you need more than that. The world building is crude and mechanical, and the overall direction is borrowing from the esteem of other great movies. It's strange, isn't it? Everything exterior to Phoenix's performance I don't like. Essentially everything that Todd Phillips was responsible for. I'm not necessarily saying that the man wasn't being sincere when he made this, more so that he just didn't really know what he was doing. He's definitely trying to be artistic. A reoccurring element in the film are these slow motion scenes where Joker starts to randomly dance whilst sad music plays. These are supposed to be those special additional scenes that were a spontaneous inclusion on the director's behalf. Let's just stop and let the scene breathe a while, let the character just be. It's Todd trying to be all artsy, and that's all well and good, but this shit is just hollow. Just have the guy dance all artistically, put sad music over it, and there's no way it won't be Le Sad. This is bordering on film student vibes. These instances are quite random and don't really tie into the themes of the film in any meaningful way.
It's murder on the dance floor.
It's possible that they may work better with music that isn't so overbearingly, this is the sad bit of the movie. Yeah, this film's score kinda sucks ass. Just utter emotional manipulation with no craftsmanship. It's a cello piece as well, it's literally one hair away from being a, oh why don't you play me a violin? Well, what do you know, this is one of those situations where getting the dude bro who made the Hangover movies to direct a sensitive piece of art was a bad idea. If you resonate with these scenes, then that's okay. You're just easier to emotionally manipulate. What can I say, Todd Phillips isn't an artist. Or at least not a very good artist. An artist doesn't go, ooh, I'm making a film about an insane man. I know, I'm gonna put a fractured glass motif in there. Yes. Right, so in this scene I want to convey this idea that the city's on the brink of poverty, basically. And I also want to put the audience on edge a little bit. Oh, I know. I'll add another fluorescent flickering light in again. That'll do it.
Hey,
Take off your fucking hat. You're in a restaurant, for Christ's sake. Come on.
I'm not going to compare this film to Taxi Driver, but I'm going to compare this film to Taxi Driver. If it didn't want people to compare it like so, then it shouldn't have so aggressively invited the comparison. When it comes to homages, it doesn't get any less subtle than this. Aside from the almost constant Taxi Driver pastiche, there are scenes that are almost straight replicas of scenes from Taxi Driver or The King of Comedy, shirtlessly practicing with his gun in his apartment, and it's even a similar looking gun. Imagining he's on a chat show in his living room whilst there's imaginary audience sounds. It's an unmistakable level of visual tribute that it borders on parody. I don't mind films having nods to past works that inspired them, but I prefer it not to be so in your face. When there are literal shots that are designed only to replicate the emotions and tones of the ones from Taxi Driver, then you start to ask yourself, where does this new movie's own thematic voice start?
I mean, you handle some pretty rough customers, huh?
Yeah.
You carry a piece?
No.
You need one?
You gotta protect yourself out there. Otherwise, you're gonna get fucked.
Like an open sewer, you know? It's full of filth and scum. Sometimes I go out and I smell it. I get headaches. It's so bad, you know?
Everybody is awful these days. It's enough to make anyone crazy.
It also heavily homages The King of Comedy with all of the stand-up and talk show elements, and then there's Robert De Niro's casting itself, which is an homage to both films. It should be noted that these homages don't just end at the visuals, because the entire narrative of Joker is thematically so similar to these two Scorsese movies. It's okay to take inspiration from older cinema and use that to inform your new creation, but you have to make something significantly new and distinct. It's not that Joker had to be better than Taxi Driver, it just needed to be a unique enough experience where you go, well, I can see what inspired it, but this is a substantially different movie, both visually and narratively. And in my own experience, all this film did was remind me of how much I loved Taxi Driver, and thus made me wish I was just watching that film. This film offered very little when it came to its own original statements and tones. If you ask me, it was only inevitable that viewers would compare this to Taxi Driver and think how much better that film was as opposed to this new one. It pretty much set itself up for that. Furthermore, you have this film Taxi Driver, which, love it or hate it, was a sincere work of art created to be just so. It wasn't a studio movie, it was a piece made with the express intentions of telling a story. It wasn't trying to be a big hit, it wasn't trying to bolster a franchise, it was just an artist creating. Director Martin Scorsese also grew up in New York and had an intimate knowledge of this city. He had a personal connection to this place, and a personal message about this place that he genuinely wanted to put out there. He knew firsthand how dire the situation was there. He created Travis Bickle because Travis Bickle was someone who existed within his own soul. He was Travis Bickle, he lived that life to a certain extent, of course. It was a sentiment that just needed to be expressed. He didn't do it because movies about the underclass are in right now. Joker is a studio film that had the task of reinventing the DC franchise because at that time, DC was in the shitter. Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad and Justice League were all obnoxious, overindulgent action fests that got panned by critics. It was a bad look for DC, this made them look desperate, cynical and unsophisticated. A studio shamelessly trying to leech off of the success of the Marvel franchise. In response to all of these critical failures, DC opted for a new approach. They were going to divide the universe, focus on standalone stories. Films could have their own concrete styles and tones without having to worry about fitting in with a grander franchise. This was a better way to go about it because individual films could have a detailed amount of care devoted to them again. With each film, they try out a different movie style. Maybe one could be a silly comedy, maybe one could be ultra realistic and gritty, maybe one could be R-rated. With Joker, they landed on the style of 70s Scorsese character studies, probably because this was a surefire way to make your franchise appear sophisticated and subtle. This is what I believe the Joker film to be, a studio-mandated attempt to ape the style of a respected and renowned set of films from history in order to appear profound and intellectual. We're moving away from silly action movies. This one's for the movie fans. This one's real. It's going to be well shot. It's going to make you think. It's going to have social commentary. Joaquin Phoenix is going to play the Joker. This is truly an art house movie. No, this is not an art house movie, this is the brand of an art house movie. To these studios, everything is a brand. Every image, every style, every inkling of tone or personality. Where we see creativity, they see a popular novel aesthetic that they can use to dangle in front of audiences. Regardless of how any of us thought Joker turned out, this was where the idea was born from. You can say, well, lots of movies are made from a capitalistic point of origin. That doesn't mean they're inherently bad. True, but for them to strategically go about recreating the sensibilities of Taxi Driver, a film that is fundamentally built upon this idea of the artistry taking precedence over monetary gain, a film that only works because it was created under this authentic mindset. The idea of an indie character study is that it's personal, independently funded, and inherently non-conformist to Hollywood tropes. So why on earth would a giant Hollywood studio try and recreate something like this? Taxi Driver is Martin Scorsese making a movie about the city he grew up in. With Joker, there's no personal vision to base this upon, no real-life experience that informs the soul of the movie. All they have is Todd Phillips.
He was a retard.
At least that's how it seems to me. Think about it, it's a studio-commissioned personal character study. That's an oxymoron. For DC's next trick, they'll make a Mr. Freeze origin story in the style of John Cassavetes' Faces.
Rest well, my love. The monster who took you from me will soon learn that revenge is a dish best served cold.
What makes matters worse is that with Taxi Driver and even The King of Comedy, Scorsese shoots things like a documentary. It's a totally naturalistic lens through which he is presenting this city and its inhabitants. The performances are fluid and non-cliche. There's nothing in this movie that feels like a manufactured piece of storytelling, it just is. For all we know, this is real. No one's playing it up, there's no attempts to overtly pull at the audience's heartstrings with tropey, melodramatic dialogue. Switch over to Joker, which is full of Hollywood tropes. Again, not necessarily a bad thing fundamentally, but since this film is clearly trying to match the thematic authenticity of Taxi Driver, having all of these overused and predictable cinematic conventions really sets it back a great deal. Why pastiche a film renowned for its naturalism? There's something perverse about trying to homage an earnest snapshot of reality whilst including all of these tired, formulated contrivances. Obvious and overbearing musical cues that insist an emotion upon the audience, pathetic fallacy, laughably unoriginal and derivative twists revolving around everything being in the character's head. Additionally, as a mental illness psycho thriller, it possesses far too many cliches from that subgenre. Honestly, you can play psycho movie cliche bingo with this. Messed up relationship with mother, crooked smiles, random acts of violence that look scary in trailers, fractured glass to illustrate his fractured mind, uncanny laughing, and again, all in the head. This is some shit that studio execs come up with when they think, scary, shocking, psychopath movie.
He's always been such a happy little boy.
Talented filmmakers can take cliches and weave them into a narrative in a way that feels fresh, but I don't think that's what this film does. In Joker, these cliches manifest themselves in the most expected and familiar fashions.
He's always been such a happy little boy.
Maybe a little bit of warmth, maybe a hug, Dad.
Oh, and despite its intentions to be standalone, it still can't help itself from slyly jerking your dick with reminders of the bigger universe it's a part of. Things you all know and love. Look, it's Batman. Yeah, this is what artists do, boys and girls. They dangle popular iconography in front of viewers to give them a quick dopamine hit. Here's an idea, don't include any Batman stuff whatsoever. What a dumb scene. What a stupid scene. At least when Alfred shows up, we can be thankful that he doesn't get outright name dropped. He's a butler accompanying Bruce, we all know who this is. As they were walking away, I half expected the kid to say, "Are you okay, Alfred?" You know, just so people wouldn't be confused. It'd be really funny if, as Alfred was leading Bruce away from the gate, he said, "Don't worry, Master Bruce, we won't be seeing any more of him again." Aside from The King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, there are other movies that this film takes inspiration from. All the movies I'm about to mention are deeply superior films, and you should seek them out over Joker. There's clearly some Death Wish in there, some falling down. There's one shot that seems to be mirroring a similar shot from The French Connection. Why do this? I'm telling you, this film has a fetish for reminding you of better movies. What's next? You're gonna give nods to the silent era? Oh, for God's sake. Yeah, modern times, there's another personal piece of art that effortlessly accentuated the public outcry of the time, as opposed to this film. Outside of influences and pastiches, you're also unfortunately reminded of other great movies like The Master due to Joaquin's involvement. They can get the exceptional performance without the mediocre dialogue, so you get the Big Mac without the pickles.
Maybe a hug, Dad.
This is certainly a really good Joaquin Phoenix performance, but by God, it's far from his best.
Keep on going till you hit the spot. Fucking give it to me, baby, nice and slow.
Joker is quite an interesting case study because it might be the first instance of a factory art house movie, a movie made in a particular vein to capitalise off of the genre of 70s indie filmmaking. The reason why various film fans didn't like the movie when it came out was because it foolishly likened itself to a film that's held in high regard. I'm not being funny or anything, but these Kino virgins have seen some pretty out there shit. They've gone to hell and back. Like, call them film snobs, call them whatever you want, but they've been to one end of the universe to the other, and if you want to impress them, it'll take something mighty. And you can counter that by saying, oh, who cares what the cinephiles think, but then why cater to them in the first place? Why pretend to them that you've got a movie here that's really going to make them think? Joker isn't a terrible movie or anything, like it's not worthless, but it set itself up for criticism by doing this. It jerked the dicks of the Kino fans with all of these allusions to Taxi Driver. If you went to see Joker and were disappointed with how basic it is, then you're justified for feeling that way because it falsely advertised itself as something thought-provoking, when really it's closer to an entry-level social commentary movie for beginners, kinda like how Deadpool is a beginner's guide to meta-comedy. Sure, it's not terrible, but it's just kinda lightweight, like there's not that much going on. One is bound to get a little disinterested. Make no mistake, I'm not saying Joker is flawed because it's accessible. You can be the most mass-appealing film in all existence and still have an insightful message. I'm saying Joker is flawed because it pandered for mass appeal. It took a movie style that's synonymous with experimental risk-taking and made a mainstream, watered-down version of an art piece that they could market to a broad audience. Yeah, it's dark, it's filthy, gory, depressing, but not in any manner that audiences aren't familiar with by now. Not in any manner that's actually going to shock or outrage anyone. This is studio manufactured, safe edginess that we can all handle. There's nothing risky about this. And yes, comic book fans liked it, but let's be real, it doesn't take that much skill to impress these guys. Especially the DC fans from back then who just undergone the Great Depression of good filmmaking. Those fuckers would have taken anything.
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
A cohesive 3-act structure and a quasi-likeable protagonist is all they need. I'm exaggerating, but there is a little bit of truth to all of this. This film doesn't really respect the audience's intelligence that much. It's definitely geared towards a certain demographic. Lots of higher-ups meddling and saying you just need to make that a little bit more clearer there because people might not get that. As pretentious as it may be to say, if you've seen a wider variety of films, it's easier to see the tackiness of Joker. I'll describe it like this. Say you go to another country for a month and you explore their whole culture, you get completely immersed in that, the real thing, and you compare that to the experience of going to a tacky American souvenir shop of that culture. Well, I'm not going to have a go at anyone for enjoying the time in that souvenir shop, but also, it's shit. If you just describe it in a different way, it's just because it's film and people are like, you can't tell me how many films I need to see. If you describe it in a different way, it's not pretentious. Okay, here's another example. I live in England and 40 minutes down the road somewhere, there's this kind of facility that lets you ski down a artificial ski slope. It's one slope, it's kind of shit, it's tiny really. And then you can compare that to actually going to the Alps and skiing in the mountains. Like, that's the difference in quality here. It was honestly the funniest thing because when Joker came out, I saw this letterboxd review going around and people were saying this is so pretentious, and it said something like, yes, a pool seems deep if you've never swam in the ocean, and I saw that and said, that perfectly sums this up, and everyone's just ragging on that guy because of how pretentious it was. Like, as pretentious as it sounds, like, I'll die on the hill. Like, sure, I'm never going to go up to people and say, you need to watch this film, you need to watch these films, you don't have a credible opinion until you watch all of these. But at the same time, like, we're talking about films here, and the best way to study film is to watch as many as you can. Now, let's just pretend it's all meaningless. Like, nah, actually, there's nothing to watching films. It's not enriching at all, actually. I'm just watching loads of films for no reason. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't help at all. I don't enjoy it. I just do it because whatever. I'm going to stop there because I don't really like taking myself too seriously when it comes to all of this film knowledge stuff. When people come up to me and say, oh, you're the film guy, you know your shit, I'm like, that's so fucking stupid. It wasn't just dumb comic book fans that like this film. There's plenty of, like, rational people. There are even some cinephiles too that like this film, and fair enough, if the goofiness wasn't a problem, I can't take that away from you. Can't wait to get called pretentious, even though that's not the correct word for what's going on here. Like, pretentiousness implies there's some pretense, there's some deceit going on, and I mean everything I say. Full of myself, that's an insult I'll take any day of the week, but pretentious, nah, just doesn't fit. If you think I am being pretentious, then all I can say is that there's nothing more pretentious than pretending like you're profound when you're not, and that's exactly what Joker does. On paper, the story of Joker is good. It has a valid social comment despite being rather platitudinous. It's far from the first film to say these things or tackle these themes in these specific ways. There's an endless supply of films that do what this film's trying to do better and in a manner that's more personal and original. There are better examples of mental illness media as well as character studies of downward spirals. Homage-wise, it doesn't reinvent or transform things enough to distinguish itself from the things it's aping. Dissimilar to how a Tarantino homages movies, where he nods to great works of cinema from the past whilst also creating a standalone movie that feels like its own experience. Django Unchained, a very different movie to the original Django. Inglourious Bastards, a very different experience to The Dirty Dozen. Overall, it's not a terrible movie. It's actually quite decent in a lot of areas, but it just has enough overused and familiar tropes to leave a bad taste in your mouth. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and remember, the people who have seen the most films have the most credible film opinions. If you thought Joker was deep, then you are easy to impress, and you don't watch enough Kino, and I mean what I say, by the way. What do you get when you cross indie cinema with the dude who made the Hangover movies and Due Date? I tell you what you get fucking mid! Special thanks to the patrons. Thank you DF, because he's changed his name from something explicit, and thank you Mason Leiden, if I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah. No, honestly, your contributions mean the world. Thank you so much. It's amazing that people are actually giving me money for this stupid shit. Anyway, thank you so much, honestly.
You haven't a wank. You haven't a wank. You haven't a wank.
The throat.
You haven't a wank. You haven't a wank.
You disgusting fat fuck.
You haven't a wank. You haven't a wank.
The throat.
You haven't a wank.
You haven't a wank. Disgusting fat fuck.
You haven't a wank.